Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope that you're all well. In the Embrace of the Quran is a series of short videos where I share with you my brief reflections on verses that capture my attention, and especially where I connect at an emotional level. Videos in this series will be released on Fridays to those members who are supporting my channel, so they've joined the supporter tier, and videos will then be made public on the following Wednesdays to everyone on my channel. If you want to join the supporter tier of membership to get early access to these videos, then please just hit subscribe. You will then see a join button on my channel page, and you can click on that and set up payment to join the supporter tier. I often wonder why the Quran mentions the heart so frequently rather than the rational intellect. The Quran tells us about those whose hearts have hardened and those whose hearts are soft. I think this is because our willingness to listen, to sit with discomfort, to self-reflect, to embrace change, it depends on our emotional openness or heart-centeredness. Because our heart is the seat of our spirituality and our humanity, and it is the heart where the light enters and compassion flourishes. In an increasingly fragile and unsettled world which has lost its sense of the sacred, it is important that we step into the embrace of the Quran and let the Quran hold us. The Quran brings us perspective and it gives us a sense of proportionality. So this series is focused on the softening of our hearts, and I will share with you some verses that have made me pause or feel in awe or reminded me of what's truly important. Today I'm going to talk to you about Surah Qaaf, which is the 50th chapter of the Quran. It is a short chapter where Allah responds to the oft-repeated argument of the polytheists of Makkah as to how can they be resurrected after they have died and turned to dust. Usually this argument is countered by reminding the Makkans of Allah's absolute power and ability to create. We find the same theme here. Verses 1 to 16 of the surah emphasize God's magnificent and flawless creation. I will read the verses to set the context for you from verse 1 to 16, but my focus today primarily is on a phrase in verse 7, and that phrase is zawjin, bahijin. It is that caught my attention when I was reading this chapter the other day. So let me read those first 16 verses out, and then I'll focus on verse 7. And I have to put my glasses on because I'm now reading from my little Quran. This is Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation. So this is Surah Qaaf, chapter 50 of the Quran. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qaaf, by the glorious Quran, you are Allah's messenger. But they wonder that there has come to them a warner from among themselves. So the unbelievers say, this is a wonderful thing. What? When we die and become dust, shall we live again? That is a sort of return far from our understanding. So this is the argument from the polytheists of Makkah, and now Allah is responding to that argument. We already know how much of them the earth takes away. With us is a record guarding the full account. But they deny the truth when it comes to them, so they are in a confused state. Do they not look at the sky above them? How we have made it and adorned it, and there are no flaws in it. And the earth, we have spread it out and set thereon mountains standing firm, and produced therein every kind of beautiful growth in pairs. Zawjin bahijin, to be observed and commemorated by every devotee turning to Allah. And we send down from the sky rain charged with blessing, and we produce therewith gardens and grains for harvests, and tall and stately palm trees with shoots of fruit stalks piled one over another, as sustenance for Allah's servants. And we give new life therewith to land that is dead. Thus will be the resurrection. Before them was denied the hereafter by the people of Nuh, the companions of Ar-Ras, the Thamud, the Ad, Fir'aun, the brethren of Lut, the companions of the wood, and the people of Toba. Each one of them rejected the messengers, and my warning was duly fulfilled in them. Were we then weary with the first creation, that they should be in confused doubt about a new creation? It was we who created man, and we know what dark suggestions his soul makes to him, for we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. So these are the first 16 verses. And as you can see that Allah is describing the beauty and perfection of his creation and saying that if he can create the first time around and not get tired, he can create the second time around and not get tired. And that is how resurrection will happen. Now, when reading these verses, I noticed the mention of plants, zawjin, bahijin, which basically means beautiful growth in pairs. And I want to reflect on this more deeply. So Zawj, as you know, is pairs. The word Zawj is mentioned a lot in the Quran. And Allah tells us that this is part of his design. This is how he creates. He creates in pairs. And in comparison, Allah is alone. He is not part of a pair. And when I mean he's alone, it means that there is unicity or tawheed or oneness to Allah, because he's not part of a pair, but his creation is in pairs. Then there is the word bahijin. So zawjin, bahijin. Bahijin, the word bahij actually contains within it the meaning of joy or happiness or splendor or delight. If you look at Lane's lexicons, you look at classical Arabic usage, bahij is, so Lane says that bahij is beautiful or goodly, or beautiful in color, or beautiful and bright or splendid, or applied to a plant, it has this latter meaning, this last meaning, splendid. So bright or splendid. But we can include in this the meaning of delight and joy as well. And when I read this verse and I looked up the Arabic, I felt, because I thought, okay, plants are being described, but why the word bahij used to describe these plants? And when I realized that the word bahij brought within it the meaning of splendor and delight and joy and magnificence and brightness and beauty, I just felt this calm descend on me when I read this phrase, because my mind recalled the experience of woodland walking. And in my life, I feel that this is one of the greatest blessings and greatest privileges that I have a small woodland, just a 5-minute walk from where I live. And that woodland is, and its presence has increasingly become more pivotal in my life. It is a space that grounds me. I love the steady presence of the trees. I love the silence and the calm. And then you have the bird song in the tree canopy, especially early in the morning or just before sunset, when the birds are still in their nests or they're returning to their nests. There's this cacophony of noise. It's kind of almost like this orchestra in nature, and it's absolutely stunning. And in that woodland, I feel that the trees have soaked up a lot of my feelings, my worries, my sadness, my grief. I remember about 4 years ago when I was just finishing off my doctoral thesis, and it took such a long time, over 8.5 years. I was working full time. I was raising a young family. My twins were only 10 when I went back to research and started my doctorate. And by the time I finished, they were starting university. So it took that long. So it was a long journey, and there were many moments when I wanted to walk away from it. And I remember finishing the almost final draft, and this kind of reality descended that, oh my God, I am just 2 steps away from the finish line. And I remember I put on my earphones and I went out to the woodland for a walk, and I literally just burst into tears. That sense of I can now see the finish line was so profound, and I still remember that moment. So I've had many moments like that walking in the woodland. There is something so incredibly calm about being in those spaces, and it's such a privilege. And I feel that that woodland is therapeutic. It is therapy. It is free therapy. I don't have to pay the woodland to get those moments of calm and that grounding. And on many, many incredibly challenging occasions in my married life, both my husband and I have faced those challenges. We have talked through those challenges, and kind of worked out solutions together, walking through that woodland. And some of our most meaningful conversations actually happen walking in the woodland. So when I read that phrase, I could immediately feel why Allah would describe the trees and growth as splendid and almost magical. And of course, then there are the colors, there's the sensory, the colors and the seasons. You get the spring blooms, and then you get the gorgeous autumn colors, and then the coolness in the summer. Under the tree canopy, it's almost always 5 or 6 Celsius cooler than it is outside. And all of those experiences have become really meaningful and profound in my life. And, I'm there practically every day. And if I'm not in the woodlands for a couple of days, I really actually miss it. And so, if we just pause for a moment and reflect on this beautiful creation that God has created for us, and just how much goodness He has put in that creation for our benefit. So, there is not just splendor in those trees, there is also benefit in them. And the verses, of course, talk about the palm trees and the the date palm trees that bring with them fruit as well and feed people. There is sustenance in them as well. So, not just joy and calm, but also sustenance. And then I was also thinking, again, pondering on this phrase about, all of the scientific data now, kind of everything that science is now telling us. So we know that exposure to woodland trees, it boosts our immune system because they release these chemicals they call phytoncides. And when we inhale those chemicals, they literally give a boost to our immune system. So being around trees actually makes us healthier, not just mentally, but physically. So you literally you don't get ill very often if you walk around trees. Green spaces actually lead to population level improvements in mental health. So, if we want to be happier and healthier as societies collectively, trees are pivotal to that. And there have been studies even documenting how people recover more quickly from illness, or if they have had surgery, if they are in green spaces, or even if they can see a green space from the hospital window. We know that tree roots under the forest floor, just beneath the forest floor, they communicate to each other. So there is an ecosystem of communication, and they warn each other about upcoming drought or, a pest disease. And tens of thousands of mini beasties live in trees, insects and worms and fungi and lichens and mushrooms, and hundreds of birds nest in those trees. And each and every tree captures carbon over tens or hundreds of years as well. And I thought to myself, well, a tree is remarkably a living universe in itself. A single tree is a living universe. And trees see generational time in generations, over many generations. And trees outlive us and our cars and our shiny houses if we let them outlive us. And this is why I really, really, really don't like people who cut down trees without reason and they don't replace them, or they talk about cutting down trees, or they mention trees as a form of nuisance. I mean, I've heard many of my fellow Pakistanis talk about cutting down mature trees in their gardens because they don't like to pick up autumn leaves. Yes, there is a bit of tidying up to do if you've got trees around you. And I've even heard my fellow countrymen talk about trees blocking the view of their shiny brick and mortar mansion. So, I live in this big mansion and I want the whole world to know just how pretty my house is. And this tree is blocking the view. And often they prefer concrete to these trees. So the lady of the manor can ask the maid to sweep and power wash the driveway. So you get rid of the trees and the grass and you put concrete there. So then your shiny car can sit on the concrete. And I do wonder about, how many birds could have nested there, how much coolness could have been brought to the garden and the home in searing heat. And what if this was a fruit tree that's been taken down? If the tree had been allowed to live and thrive, how many would have delighted in tasting the fruit of those trees? And sometimes I also feel terrified about losing trees because of climate change and our obsession with shiny malls and shiny mansions and shiny cars and shiny things in general. What if the woodland falls silent and then die? What if there are no birds in the trees anymore because the trees can't sustain the little universe that they have in them, the little living universe. And I really feel grief and fear at the same time whenever this question surfaces in my thoughts. And I remember I'd read it somewhere in an article where somebody had said that they were terrified about the woodlands falling silent and then the woodlands dying. We can't imagine a world without woodlands. And if we let this happen, if we let the woodlands die and the trees die, then we will commit an unforgivable collective sin, and it is a sin that will create an existential crisis for us all. And those are some of the reflections that were floating about in my mind when I read that phrase. A tree is a living universe. Trees see generational time in generations. Trees are gifts to our children and our grandchildren. They're magnificent, they're splendid. They're zawjin, bahijin. Assalamu alaikum.